Even though this is one of the most well-known classic cars in the world, it was almost never made.
The Corvette came out in 1953, and it was designed to attract sports car people. And the sports car people became alive in America because of the Second World War. The Americans in Europe were exposed to sports cars. So coming back to America, they wanted this. And so General Motors stepped up.
Prior to that point, all cars had been designed by engineers. There hadn't even been a director of design at General Motors. Harley Earl, who was the guy, let's call him the father of design, the guy that invented automotive design, really. He literally created General Motors styling. It was called the Art and Color Department. And now that he was retiring, he had pretty much decided that that whole importance of guiding the company was going to transition to his right-hand man, who was a guy named Bill Mitchell. Bill Mitchell was probably one of the most powerful guys I've ever worked for, and a guy that loved cars.
In 1957, General Motors hired a 19-year-old designer, the youngest in company history. That designer was Peter Brock.
At the same time, there was a real problem from the standpoint of product liability in Detroit.
Because illegal street racing was increasing in popularity, public safety reached a tipping point on American roads. The fallout of all of this was the AMA ban. The Automobile Manufacturers Association outlawed sports car production.
The collateral damage in this was the Corvette program. That was the end of the Corvette program. As far as they were concerned, the program was gone. It had been cut off. It was never going to happen again. They were not going to be involved in racing. But Bill Mitchell had been there long enough to realize that over time, everything changes and goes back to whatever is successful and sells automobiles. He personally decided that he would go against management and design a new Corvette in secret. So I arrived at that time when this was going on. That individual had that much power and vision to change the corporation and decide to build a Corvette in secret. Now, he could not go upstairs at the Chevrolet studio to do that. He came downstairs to where the advanced concept was. Management never really comes down there. This was the one place that Bill Mitchell could go and present his idea for a new Corvette and know that he could develop it in secret. Here I was in advanced concept. I'd only been there a few months, and Bill Mitchell walks in. He says, "Guys, come on over here, sit down. I want to tell you what I want to do." Now, he wants to make a statement. This is going to be a breakaway from all the previous work that had been done there. And we're looking at each other going, Bill Mitchell wants us to design the new Corvette.
So he was looking for more concepts, drawing
He wanted everybody to try every possible thing, and he would pick the stuff out. He realized stuff that was too far out. Some of it was difficult, even to think about doing, but you have to reach, you have to try and put stuff out there and see what it looks like. Mitchell comes back into the studio after about a week, and he slowly walks around the room, looks at all these sketches on the wall, and stops at one sketch and said, this is looking pretty good. He says, who did this? Okay, he says, great.
He liked it because of the fenders, how they were bulged, and how the line between the fenders kept the fenders together.
He says, all right, I want you to be the lead designer on this project.
It's pretty incredible to think that Peter Brock was only 20 years old when he sketched the original concept for the Corvette Stingray. And that's a sketch that Bill Mitchell literally picked off of the wall that would go on to inspire car designers for generations to come.
So you got to realize that Bill Mitchell is the designer. What we are is the guys that are illustrating his ideas for him. This car's form developed over a period of time. So this is quite an early sketch. You can see this is 9/24/57. So this is a couple of months before we got the final design.
General Motors eventually figured out that Bill Mitchell was working on a new Corvette concept in secret.
Bill Mitchell was not just...
Management liked what they discovered behind the scenes and decided to let Bill Mitchell continue with development under two conditions. First, he would have to finance the concept himself, and second, he couldn't use the Corvette name.
So at that point, he had to back up and say, okay, we can't finish the thing up in coupe form because building a coupe is about 3 times more complicated than building a roadster. Since he's paying for it himself, he said, we're going to do this as a roadster. So this is where we developed what became the XP87. And ultimately, that's what the C2 is. Bill Mitchell, being a deep sea fisherman, loved going down to Florida. And so he named the car the Stingray. I mean, that had sort of a magical thing to him, this beautiful thing that flowed through the water and stuff. So the lines of the Stingray all the way around and the sharp tail and stuff on it.
Duntov, who was the chief engineer at GM during this time, deserves a lot of credit for the success of the Corvette.
Tell me, what do you think about acceleration and traction?
He was constantly pushing the limits of not only the engineering, but the performance of the Stingray. His background as a European engineer and as a race car driver at Le Mans added a ton of value to the performance and design of the '63 Corvette.
And this was Zora's main thing all the time that he was working at General Motors, was constantly trying to improve the Corvette. And he was constantly butting heads, of course, with the bean counters because anything that he wanted to do was going to be more expensive. So there was always this limitation of what could happen with the car. But if it had not been for Zora, the car would not have progressed and progressed and progressed. The important thing is here, we had a strong leader with Bill Mitchell and what he wanted for that car. That doesn't mean that the design group around him agreed with everything he was doing. In fact, we fought with him on several things.
One of the things that they famously disagreed on was the split window design, which only ended up being offered for the first year of production. But it came to be known as one of the most defining features of the vehicle.
Bill had a great love of the great classic cars that were done during the 30s, and one of his favorite was the Bugatti with a split window in the back end. When I'd finished the car up as a coupe, and he said, okay, now I want you to model that as 2 separate windows. We're going to have a separate window on either side.
Zora Duntov, who was the chief engineer, didn't want it because it was hindering to the driver. They couldn't see out the rear window.
Duntov comes in, and I remember him, in this wonderful Russian accent. I mean, he was just absolutely apoplectic. What is this? And it turns into this giant shouting match. And the bottom end of it is that Mitchell throws Zora out of the studio and says, I don't want you coming back in here. This is my car, and you don't have anything to say about it. And he was absolutely right, because he had built the car on his own money, and Chevrolet Engineering had not put a dime into the car, so they didn't have a word to say about it. And as much as Zora didn't like the car, that's the way it was going to be.
He pushed the limits of what was possible. And I think that was part of why he butted heads with Bill Mitchell. It was because he wanted certain things performance-wise, and Bill Mitchell wanted certain things aesthetically speaking. And the two are not necessarily compatible.
So that's why this car is such an iconic design of Bill Mitchell, because it is reflected with all the details he had on it, primarily the split window.
Unique features in the 1963 Stingray, one of which would be the hideaway headlamps, which became a trademark for the Corvette all the way until the 2005 version.
It wasn't just the car, lines. They made the suspension on that car independent rear suspension, independent front suspension.
Up to this point, they had solid axles, which made for a rough ride, and when cornering could cause some problems.
So it just really rode wonderful, and it cornered immaculately.
The 1963 Stingray also had some really top-of-the-line engine packages if you wanted to splurge and you wanted the fastest Corvette. You could have a fuel-injected V8 with 360 horsepower.
Look at the car and look at that tapered line that goes all the way around, what we call the belt line in the studio. It tapers off toward the back end. When we finally got the sketch that Bill Mitchell finally picked off the wall, you can see this car is clear up in November 22nd, 57. So it's 2 months between that thing and this thing. And during that period of time, there were all kinds of sketches and ideas before we did it. But as I was telling you earlier, this particular belt line here is much lower in the front and higher in the back end. And I was trying to get Bill to do that because I knew aerodynamically that would work out a lot better. You know, finally at that point, after gently trying to put that idea across, he says, you know, kid, I want you to understand that I designed the Corvettes around here. Now just do what I tell you. The other thing that was really interesting is that, again, cost became a factor on the car. And as you look around at this Stingray, you'll see that there are various vents on the car, on the side front fenders and on the C-pillar in the back. Those are phony vents. It used to drive us nuts that those weren't functional. So when Bill would come into the studio, he'd want to put all these little things on the car, and it would just drive us crazy because we were trying to keep the form as pure and as functional as possible. His point was that when the people walk into a showroom and walk around the car, there has to be certain points of interest that they talk about. So we had a special word for these, and we called those surface entertainment. But they did sell cars.
Today.
It was the first time that General Motors had made money on the Corvette program. I think they sold 10,000 units immediately on it.
As I understand, in '63, they sold about the same amount of convertibles as they did the coupe. I think I can understand that because the convertible was always there, but now there's a coupe. And it became one of the big sellers.
Time is the only judge of good design, and great design lasts forever because there's a universal appeal that it attracts people, and it has that aesthetic form that people agree on that makes the car successful. And that has certainly happened with the split window Corvette. It has become the most beautiful form of its particular time.
It became known as a world-class sports car.
And to have been a part of that, you know, is just really exciting for me still. I see the car on the road and I love it.
Corvette is going to be around for a long, long time. And this one is going to be known forever.